My patient Robert was 50 years old, and from the outside it looked like he was doing everything right. But he wasn't recovering the way he was used to. He was more sore after workouts. He had more fatigue during the day. His sleep was off, and something had clearly changed. Most troubling to him is that he was noticing a change in the bedroom and a significant step off of his libido and his sexuality. Robert saw his primary care doctor, who did some basic laboratory testing. His doctor obtained a testosterone level which was low normal. He obtained a basic blood count which was normal, and he also did a lipid study. Now, for those of you who follow my channel, you'll know that I think that this really doesn't give a comprehensive insight into what's going on with the body. So the purpose of this video is to tell you a story, and it's to tell you the story of my patient Robert, and hopefully as you watch this video you might be able to glean some insight into some of the struggles and some of the symptoms and ultimately some of the treatments that may benefit you as well. And the bottom line here is to discuss how cortisol and stress impact our sex hormones and our overall health, wellness, and longevity. Because what I haven't told you is that Robert was a type A business person. He was always making deals. He was always on airplanes flying around the country. And he recognized that he was experiencing a fair amount of stress, but he, and unfortunately his doctor, didn't take the opportunity to really look deeply into what could be driving his symptoms. And the purpose of this video is to explain how cortisol lords over all of our bodily functions. Cortisol is the king of hormones, and cortisol's job is primarily to keep us safe from a stressor. But the most significant human stressor is not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. It's starvation. And cortisol is geared to continually maintain a steady flow of blood glucose in our bloodstream. And it does this at the expense of melting our body. Cortisol breaks down our muscles into amino acids for use elsewhere. It breaks down our fat supplies into free fatty acids that are then shuttled into our mitochondria to make energy. And cortisol breaks down our bones to liberate minerals like calcium and magnesium and zinc. Cortisol also fits into a critical structure of my health systems pyramid, which is the metabolic energy strata, where it works hand in hand with insulin and thyroid to ensure that we stay alive. My name is Scott Resnick. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm making these videos to empower you guys with good information and to simplify complex subjects so that you can turn around your health and wellness, increase your lifespan and longevity without using conventional drugs. And today we're talking about cortisol. With Robert, we expanded his laboratory testing, and I'm not going to go over all of the laboratory tests that we checked in this video, but I am going to focus on a few significant ones, because not only did we obtain a total testosterone, we also obtained a free testosterone. This is important because testosterone is a hormone which is bound to a carrier protein in the bloodstream. This is known as sex hormone binding globulin. So an individual can have a normal testosterone level as measured by their conventional doctor. But if you're not measuring the free testosterone, you're measuring all the testosterone which is available to the cells in addition to that which is tightly bound onto this carrier protein. A man can have normal testosterone levels, high sex hormone binding globulin, high estrogens, and still have a low free testosterone. And this is what we found in my patient Robert. But perhaps the most important thing that we obtained was a 4-part salivary cortisol test, because this gave Robert some insight into his adrenal secretion of cortisol over the course of the day. And I can tell you the bottom line is that his cortisol was high. It was high in the morning, it was high through the afternoon, and also it was high in the evening. And I have no question that this early evening cortisol spike was contributing to his difficulty sleeping. And we all know how important sleep is to our health and wellness. And if you're interested in knowing your own cortisol levels and how your own cortisol handling and adrenal secretions are contributing to any components of your health and wellness, I've opened up a number of limited spots where I'm working with individuals to go over your specific cortisol findings and relate it to your health history. And you can find out more about that in the link in the description below. When we got the rest of Robert's laboratory tests back, we saw that his total testosterone was normal. His free testosterone was very low, and his sex hormone binding globulin and his estrogen levels were higher than normal. And what was happening is that he was converting more of his testosterone into estrogen. Estrogen was driving the greater production of sex hormone binding globulin, and he found himself in a vicious cycle. Now, the treatment of this was to first address his cortisol levels. And what we did is we started with a really good adaptogenic herb. I'm a big fan of ashwagandha. I have found that it has probably the most scientific research. I have found that it has helped me personally. And I've also found that it is uniformly well tolerated. This is an adaptogenic herb, and what it does is it helps to basically smooth out our adrenal responses. Think of it like this. If your cortisol is high, it helps to lower it. If your cortisol is low, it helps to raise it. It helps to normalize our cortisol response. And the other product that we put him on was something known as phosphatidylserine. And this is a membrane phospholipid that has been studied with a number of trained athletes who can generate a set amount of wattage and a set amount of cortisol and stress on a stationary bicycle. And what we found was that using phosphatidylserine, that the cortisol response was blunted. So we focused on using his phosphatidylserine in the later hours of his day when he was having a hard time shutting things down and getting to sleep. So let's fast forward 6 months, because after that time interval, in addition working with a number of mind-body practices, he took up yoga and meditation. He worked on his breathing exercises. He also worked on optimizing his diet. Now, he had a pretty good diet, but what I encouraged him to do was to kind of just spatter in bits of carbohydrates over the course of the day so that he didn't resort to his adrenal glands and his cortisol response to raise his blood sugar when it was low. After 6 months, his laboratory testing improved markedly. The first thing we noticed was an improvement in his cortisol patterns, but we also noticed that his free testosterone had increased, his sex hormone binding globulin had gone down, and his estrogen had decreased as well. Most importantly to him, his performance in the bedroom was improving, and I have no doubt that this was because he was feeling less stress. I alluded earlier to the health systems pyramid, and this is a strategy that I have used with my patients for over 15 years to help to identify, strategize, and prioritize what we need to be doing first to obtain a state of functional health and healing. It's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and foundational to the health systems pyramid is nutrition. I mean, we need nutrients to make our body's metabolic processes run smoothly. We need the right balance of amino acids. We need the right type of anti-inflammatory and pro-inflammatory fats. We need adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, and much of this is measurable. Now, once your nutritional foundation is established, your body's machinery can work well. And the next most important thing to address is how our body makes energy. And you'll see that there are 3 hormones in this strata. There are cortisol, insulin, and thyroid. And we've talked about how cortisol's job is to raise our blood sugar and basically melts down the body in the process. Well, insulin is cortisol's doppelganger. In other words, when we eat a meal, we secrete insulin, which works as a growth hormone. It takes that extra glucose and it stores it away in our muscles, in our liver, and ultimately our fat cells for a rainy day. And then thirdly, we have thyroid hormone. And thyroid is kind of like our thermostat. And when it comes to human survival, this makes sense. Because if you're in nature and you haven't had an opportunity to find some food for a little bit, and you have a finite number of calories tacked onto your body. Remember, this is a high stress state with higher amounts of cortisol, and if you're not eating, you're not making any insulin whatsoever. it makes sense that we would be able to defer to a lower metabolic rate that burns these resources more slowly. So when our cortisol goes up, we get into a relatively hypothyroid state. And it's so important when you're addressing energy and fatigue to look at these three hormones collectively. Now, to move up on the pyramid, I didn't allude to the fact that Robert was also having some significant problems with his gut health as well. So you can see how if you are imbalanced with your cortisol, if you are diverting your nurturing blood away from your gut because you haven't eaten anything to other places where our blood supply is more important, like our heart and our kidneys and our brains, it wouldn't be surprising to see that he was having some problems and maybe had developed some degree of leaky gut. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have higher order functions. These are things like reproduction and cardiovascular health and cognitive health. And you can see how when cortisol goes off, when cortisol influences our gut and our ability to absorb nutrients, as cortisol influences our thyroid status, our cognition, our energy, and slowly melts down our body, that all of these symptoms that Robert was suffering begin to make sense. Hopefully this has brought all of this stuff into light with a patient example. But if you'd like to know where you stand from a functional health perspective, I've done a really simple 2-minute self-assessment that's accessible down in the description below. These are just a series of questions that you can reflect upon to get a sense of your state of overall functional health. Because when you know where you've been, you can know where you need to go. And as always, I'll see you guys in another video, and take care.